Hi, this is Carl Irwin, and we're going to take a quick look at using Audacity in cooperation with a notation program, specifically in this case MuseScore 4. And a question came up on the Discord server on the playback section for MuseScore 4 about anybody using Audacity to mix and render out MuseScore projects. And I replied that, of course, you can do that. There's multi-track capability in Audacity, but what I use it for mostly is to master final render that's mixed from MuseScore 4. I use the mixer and the reverb settings that are available within the application because I find that they work really well to accomplish kind of the balance and space of the render, and then I master in Audacity. But I did want to take a moment to look at the future, and then we'll look at kind of a variation of a process that you might follow for mastering a single output track. This is actually Audacity 4. This is the pre-alpha nightly build as of this date. And you can see it looks like MuseScore 4. The icons, the layout looks very similar. Audio setup, mixer, undo, redo workspace, tabs. And it has a lot of capability in terms of, I think, a digital audio workstation kind of environment specifically for audio. There's no work, as has been the case with Audacity for a very long time. There's not really any work on MIDI, but as an audio sequencer, an audio editor, multi-track audio editor and mixer, they are advancing the graphic user interface to be a little bit more like a digital audio workstation. There's different workspaces that you can choose from, for audio editing, advanced audio editing, a kind of a classic view, or music, where you can actually have a space up here for meter and tempo. I don't know if there will be capabilities to have tempo changes and meter changes. I don't know if there's going to be mapping of any of that sort, but it looks like that's kind of where they're headed. You can change the way that time is counted, whether it's going to be, your time code kind of set up quite a few options in here, which has implications for if they have any video synchronization capability. I don't know if that's being discussed, but we now have that through VLC with MuseScore. If they can manage the same kind of plugin, there's a lot of implications there for film scoring from Audacity, which would be pretty great. Real-time effects, of course, are in here just as it is in Audacity 3. Right now, the effects are extremely minimal. If I select a piece of audio and I go up here to effect, you can see that the effects are extremely minimal as far as the native effects. It looks like it's going to focus on VST3 for outside effects, for third-party effects, rather than anything else, which is probably forward-looking, but a bit unfortunate, particularly for Linux people and anyone that uses VST2. I don't know if it'll have VST2 for Windows and Mac or not, but we use LV2. We have some pretty great LV2 effects for Linux that I don't know will be available. I'm not really sure what their philosophy is going to be on that. You can have the ability to change track colors. And just like in MuseScore, you get this kind of gradient color scheme that you can choose from, which is more than sufficient to, I think, identify ensemble sections. If you were going to mix individual audio tracks from MuseScore, you would be able to at least have a very good view of your section breakdown and what belongs to what. I don't know what this mixer will entail. Right now, these are placeholder buttons. In fact, even the export audio is a placeholder button. It does not do anything. So this version of Audacity is really not functional as of right now. It has very minimal capability with respect to audio editing, and that's what they're focusing on. Right now, it looks like the development team is focusing on the basic audio editing controls and trying to get that right and get it intuitive, so that basic functions can be found where you would expect to find them, and they do what you would expect them to do, and making the layout very clean and oriented to Muse Group's kind of way. And I think it'll be really nice. When they're done with this, you will have an audio editor, a multi-track audio editor, sequencer, and a very powerful notation software that can be used together to do this very idea that people are asking about. So anyway, that's MuseScore, or rather Audacity 4, and a look ahead. But right now, it's unusable. We're not really using that. This is what we're doing. I have a playback file of a brass arrangement. This is an orchestral brass arrangement of the Malott Lord's Prayer, and it's got a few of my own kind of treatments in there in terms of some modulation on the ends of phrases and a few substituted chords, my own kind of writing. But this is the piece, and I'm not going to listen to it in here because we're actually going to be looking at this in Audacity, but I just want to point out it's a playback file. It has the performance the way I want it to be for mockup. This started with a notation file that is for print. This is the playback file that does the things I want it to do. I'm using the mixer down here to set reverb, location and pan space, and levels, core basic levels. For each of these instruments to get the kind of sound that I want. And this mixer is here for a reason. The mixer's here to do that. It's not a hack to do that. You want to use the mixer. You want to use the faders to set it accurately to reflect the performance that you are trying to emulate, a real performance. And this, as I say on other videos that I have on the subject, it is, in my opinion, it is the responsibility of the user to know what that should be. It's not the responsibility of the software to know what realism sounds like. It's the responsibility of the software to do some fundamental basic things instrument by instrument, and to get a very general balance and blend without having to change any of the faders. But it's really up to the user, as has always been when writing music, to know what an orchestral music is supposed to sound like, symphonic music is supposed to sound like, whatever your instrumentation. It's up to the composer to know what sounds real and authentic and to write according to that sensibility. So use the mixer. I export the audio, and then the audio is brought into Audacity. So this is the audio. First thing you'll notice is that there are peaks that go outside of the bandwidth here. There's some clipping. Fortunately, that data is available to us, and I can select the track. And the first thing that I might do is just normalize to 0 just to see if there's anything unusual, any big spikes or clips that kind of got past me. From the render engine, from the playback engine, any clips or things that shouldn't belong there, so that I can go back and fix that. This looks pretty clean, pretty good. Notice that the loud section is considerably louder than everything else. We might want to do a little bit of enveloping to fix that. So let's start actually with that. The first thing I'm going to do is envelope this just to give a little bit more of... and this is one quick issue here to consider, is that when you're enveloping for volume, be aware that there is the two kind of philosophies here in terms of what your outcome is. One is a recording artist sort of sensibility where things are fairly compressed. So quiet parts they sound quiet because of the nature of the performance. However, in terms of the loudness in the track, it is a little bit louder than what it naturally would be. This is the recording artist sensibility. On the kind of a film score sensibility, you might say. On the other end of it, you have the archival sensibility. That is that an orchestra performs a piece of music and it is recorded and it's essentially mastered as is, and there's really not a lot of mixing going on. There's not an artificial mixing that is happening, or an artificial enveloping. It sounds really the way it would be if you were in the space, which means that quiet parts are extremely quiet, loud parts kind of fill out the bandwidth. So let's say we're going to go for a recording artist sort of sensibility. We're going to make the softs a little bit louder and kind of compress them down with the loud parts. So the first thing I'm going to do is take these sections here where you can see there's a crescendo, and I know the music. I wrote the music, so I know what it sounds like without having to listen to it. I'm going to go out here to kind of the loud part, and I'm going to put a marker here all the way at the peak. Then I'm going to come over here to a section where it's kind of tapered down to a softer area, the point where it kind of hits the lowest valley. And I'm going to put another marker, but I'm going to stretch it out to kind of bring the soft parts up a little bit. I might do a little bit of that over here in the very end as well. But this is a really quiet ending, and I kind of like that it's quiet, so I'm not going to go as far. There's a taper. This is the last hit here on the end. And I know that there's a taper release. So I'm going to accentuate that a little bit. I'm going to grab a marker way out here at the end with all this silence. And I'm actually going to bring this down almost to nothing, and I'm watching the end here to watch and see when this starts to disappear. I don't want to go that far. You can see it kind of disappears at that point. I don't want to go that far, but I do want it to get considerably softer. So I'm using this empty space here as part of my curve. I'm also going to go over here to the beginning, zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to do the same kind of thing. The first note right here, I'm going to put a marker all the way at the cap. And this is the inside cap. And then I'm going to take the outside and do the same thing. I'm going to go all the way out to the silence. I want to decrease this, not so that this goes to nothing, but so that it's significantly smaller. You get a little bit of a more gradual attack here on that very first note. And let's zoom back out. So that's a kind of a first pass on it. We'll select the whole thing, and then I'm going to mix this down to a new track. And this is destructive editing. Okay, this is destroying the original and creating a new iteration. Now I'm going to get rid of the original one, and I might do a little bit more enveloping. First I want to listen to this and just see what the volumes sound like. So I'm going to go to this kind of louder soft part. Then I'm going to go to the loud part. And it's getting pretty close. I think I want to compress it a little bit more, so I'm going to do one more envelope here. And the same thing, I might go out here to this a little bit further in, place a marker, and then I'm going to drag this up out here a little bit more. And I'm going to leave the ending the way it is because I want it to be very soft at the end. And I'm going to export this now. Or not export, but rather render it down to, mix it down to a new track. So this will be our working file here. And now what I want to do is I want to fix the equalization and compression of this track to master it. I want to master the final output so that it sounds a little bit more commercial than what MuseScore's output is. Now, first of all, I want to recognize that MuseScore's output is very good. It's a little muddy. It's not quite as bright as a commercial sort of recording. But it is very, very good. So the changes, while they may look like they're extreme initially, I really want my changes to be fairly subtle. And one strategy that you can use, there's only one strategy among many. This is not the way I always master music. I use a lot of presets in different places for equalization, just because I know MuseScore sounds a certain way. But thinking from scratch, one strategy here might be to do the following few steps. The first thing I'm going to do is duplicate this, but before I do that, I want to normalize this to -6, kind of bring it down to half of the bandwidth here. Then I'm going to duplicate it, so I'll mix this down to a new iteration of it. And I'm going to mess around with this iteration down here. So I'm going to hit mute on the top one. I'm going to add another track, and I'm going to go to the beginning here. I want to generate some pink noise. So I'm going to select, there's white, pink, and brownie in. I'm going to select pink noise. Pink noise is often used in mixing with pop music, where you will run a track of pink noise over top of your various tracks, your various mixing tracks, and then you take each one individually and you will take it all the way to 0 in terms of volume and gain, and then you bump it up until you can barely hear it over the pink noise and then pull it back a little bit. You do this with all of your inputs, and what it does is it will mix your ensemble to match the curve of pink noise, which is a fairly kind of commercial sounding curve. Pink noise is not like white noise. It doesn't have all of the frequencies. It has all the frequencies, but they are on a curve. Not even a curve, more like a slant. And we're going to look at that here in a second. So I'm going to generate some pink noise here in a track. And I'm going to normalize this also to -6. And I'm going to select a chunk of it here in the middle, or the whole thing. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to go to Analyze, and I want to hit Plot Spectrum. And if you see the frequency analysis here, it is starting at 100 hertz, which is right here, and going up to this last chunk here, which is nearly 20,000 hertz. So you have 100 here, 20,000 over here. It's a line, a very linear fall off. And what we want to do is on this second iteration of the track, we're going to try as best we can to get this kind of a fall off. We're not going to hit it exactly. We're not going to be very particular. We just want to generally kind of create this slant, this curve, which is, again, not really a curve, but more like a linear fall off. And we want it to look somewhat like this in terms of general shape. So let me close this out. Let's look at what it looks like right now. I'm going to select a really loud section right here, and then I'm going to do the same thing, plot the spectrum, and you can see it's considerably different. Out here at 20,000 hertz, it really falls off. There's nothing there. Now, you don't really hear past this, but on this track, we're going to try to match it as best we can. Over here, you can see we have a big kind of curvy bump that falls off over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply an equalization curve that will kind of scoop out. We're going to go in the other direction to try to get this to look more like a slant. So let me close this out, and we can get rid of our pink noise. We don't really need that. I'm going to select all of this, and I'm going to go to Effect, EQ, Filter Curve EQ, and I'm going to go here to 100, and you'll notice that there was a, it's a little higher on our track than it was from the pink noise, so I'm just going to bring this down quite a bit. You'll notice at the base on the very end, I think that if you look at the graph on the analysis, it actually ends at about 50 hertz. Was a little bit higher. There's a kind of a bit of a bump that's at the beginning of our track, so I'm just going to bump this up a little bit. Then there's a massive, massive scoop. I'm going to go out here to about 1,000 hertz, maybe about 2,000 hertz. I'm going to take this way down to the basement. And then at 20,000, it kind of falls off. There's really nothing there. I'm going to bring this up, and we're going to bump this quite a bit. And then right here at the very end, there's nothing. I'm going to take this way up to the roof. We're just going to kind of generically see what we can create from this. And then I'm going to just kind of smooth this curve out. And there's a gradual kind of fall off here in our track that we're accounting for. And a big scoop back here. I'm going to take this down even further. So I'm going to test this, and then I will adjust it as I need to. So I'm going to apply this to the track, and it's going to almost entirely disappear because I've taken so many frequencies out. So I'm just going to take this and we will normalize this back to -6. I'm going to take a chunk here, right? This loud part, you see the big spike that's in there. And that's okay. We're not really worried about big spikes happening because this is going to be an additive track. This is not going to be an equalization that's going to affect the entirety of the track completely. We're going to mix it in. So let me select this chunk out here, and I'm going to do the same analysis. And you can see now we have a curve. We have a slant. It's pretty good, actually. Now you can see the frequencies aren't the same, but the slant is in essentially the right direction. We've scooped out the big kind of hump that was in there, and we've gotten this curve that works quite nicely. We've introduced also frequencies that were completely absent way up at the high end that you really, again, you can hardly hear any of these things, but they are in there. It's considerably brighter now. So we're just going to call this good for right now. I think this is pretty good. And what we want to do is just do a quick comparison and listen to what happens. So if I solo the top track, we listen to this loud section. And we'll switch and go down here to our equalized track. And you can really hear this bright, brassy kind of edge because we've introduced a lot of those frequencies back in based on a curve that is rooted in pink noise, which is a very even curve. Now, I'm not going to let this sit this way. What we're going to do is we're going to mix these 1-to-1. So they're both normalized to -6, and it's going to be a kind of a half-half sort of mix. We're retaining essentially half of what we had originally from the very good MuseScore 4 output, and we're putting in this overly bright pink noise modeled equalized variation. We're going to mix these together. So we'll select both, and we'll go to Tracks, Mix, Render to New Track. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this EQ'd one because we don't really need it anymore, but I'm going to keep this one up here as a comparison later on. I'm going to hit just mute on that. So this is the track we're now working with, and the next thing we're going to do is do some compression. I'm going to take this and I'll equalize it again, normalize it back to -6, and I'm going to just run a few layers of compression. I'm going to go to Effect. I like to use the Legacy compressor, and I just use the default setting, because I can do this several times in a row until I get a waveform that I like. So I'm going to apply this, and I think I'll do it again. We're going to compress it again. Just kind of get some of these spikes to level out a little bit that are in there. And now I'm going to normalize it again, just to make sure we haven't clipped anywhere. I'm going to normalize to 0. And now what I'm going to do is apply a limiter. So we'll go to Effect, Legacy Limiter. And what I like to do is I like to shave off kind of 1 dB at a time. So I put -1, hard limit, and I'm going to put apply makeup gain. I'm going to set this to yes. So it's going to shave off that 1 dB and then move up. So we'll apply that. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to push this up so that the loudest section, I get more of these peaks kind of hitting at the roof. And I shave off the ones that kind of really stick out. I'm going to do this again. Now, some people get really carried away with this stuff, particularly with pop music, in that everything looks as what they call a sausage, where it's just been limited and compressed so much that the track is just a big blob of waveform from beginning to end. We don't really want to do that specifically with orchestral music. But at this very loud part, we can get away with some compression and limiting here. So we'll do this one more time. And now we see that we have some valleys, or rather some peaks, that are getting clipped here at the very end. Now, this won't make a clipping sound. This is merely limited. There might be some distortion artifacts if we take this too far, so we want to be very careful about that. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to limit it one more time. This time I'm going to limit it to negative 0.5, but I'm going to put no for apply makeup gain. So this will be kind of the loudness of the track, but I'm going to shave off a little bit so that we're not going to absolute zero. And this is what we get. Now, it's kind of, again, sausagey right here. So I might want to test this out real quick and see what it sounds like. Make sure we don't have any kind of garbledy artifacts in there because of the compression. There is a little bit of that. So what I'm going to do is undo the last limiter, undo the previous limiter. And I'm going to go to normalize just to make sure we're at 0. So I'm removing the second limiter that I did, and I'm going to do my final limiter right now. Okay, so I just took one of those limiting steps out of there. Listen again. And we've eliminated that artifact. Okay, so essentially this is the final track. This is it. So the last thing I might do is shave off some of the silence. And put a fade out if I need to at the beginning or the end if the track warrants that. But this is essentially a mastered track. So let's do a test here. I'm going to take this track and I'm going to normalize it out to negative 0.5, which is the same peak that we have here. And now you'll see the loudness is much bigger. Now the enveloping is original. In fact, let's do a real comparison. Let me get rid of that. And I'm going to bring in the original track. So this is the original playback track. And now on the bottom, let me change the color just to make it clear. So this is the original. And I'm going to normalize this to negative 0.5. So this is the comparison. I don't like that color. This is one of the things that really needs to be fixed in Audacity is these colors are pretty terrible. Yeah, terrible. I'm just going to go back to this blue. So the bottom is the original, and then this is the mastered version of it. Let's listen and see what the difference is. Let me go to solo. The bottom track, this is the original. Okay, and then this is the mastered track. Much more commercial. And this kind of brings up a point just about the samples in general. There's a lot of, I don't know, comparison from the Muse sound samples to other sound sets that are available in MuseScore, particularly, not on Linux. I use Linux, so I don't have access to those. But on Mac and Windows, you can use the other commercial libraries that are available from MuseHub. And, you know, people compare them and make complaints about the vanilla sound of the Muse sounds. But the truth is that they are real sounds. And the issue is not really that one is more real than the other. The issue is that it's the equalization, right? It's the compression and equalization. It's the mastering end of it. But you can deal with that. Like you can make those samples. They are fortissimo samples. You can make them brassy by bringing those frequencies back that are actually there in the real instrument, in the real recording, just in the mastering phase. You don't really have to have another library to do that. And you're not cheating by doing this. You're just doing what you're supposed to do when you mix and master. So the samples are great. The samples are fine. And whenever you do this, you can hear, we'll listen to the whole track. You can hear the quiet samples versus the loud, brassy, edgy, cuivre sounds when it gets loud, right? Let's listen to the whole thing. So this is one strategy among many, many, many strategies that you could use for mastering. The different ways that you can master are endless. You could use parallel compression, different types of compression. You can use different avenues for equalization. There's other filters you can add. Some people prefer to add effects even in there and get very, very detailed with a chain of applications in order to get to the final result. My philosophy is to keep it simple. This is one of the simple ways, I think, to do it, just using a pink noise curve to model out an additive layer to kind of correct the equalization, make it a little bit more commercial than what it is at face value. You can create these curves, and because MuseScore always puts out the same way, you can just make presets, as I mentioned before, and save those presets, and then you don't really have to go through this analysis. You just apply that chain to absolutely every single MuseScore score that you render. Now, I don't recommend that. I think it is better to kind of do every one for one, every project, especially if you tend to write music that uses very different ensembles. But in that respect, you could have presets for particular ensembles that you might write for, that you can call upon and kind of streamline this mastering procedure here. So anyway, that's what I have for you, and that's how I use Audacity with MuseScore. It's really for a final mastering kind of editing, which is, I think, is what MuseScore Audacity is really suited for. It's for audio editing and single track kind of dialing in. Is there an application for multi-track sequencing? Absolutely. Audacity can do that. It's always been able to do that. It doesn't have all the functions that a digital audio workstation have, of course not, but it still can do those things. Like, it's capable of doing that in its own destructive way. And with the real-time effects that we now have with Audacity 3, and have had in the latest iterations and will have going forward, that kind of capability will start to look more and more like digital audio workstation. Some people complain about that, the gain of capability. That makes zero sense to me, that an application would gain capability and people would gripe about it. I more so see the complaints about it becoming more advertisorial and commercial, that you have these advertisements that hit you, that kind of stuff, or that data becomes, there's a login sequence and accounts that have to be made. I can see why people would gripe about that sort of thing. But the fact that the application is gaining new functions, I only see that as a plus. And also the fact that the application is becoming more coherent and visually prettier in the Audacity 4 iteration, and more in line with other Muse applications in terms of how it looks and how it functions. I see that as a huge win, especially with respect to being competitive with proprietary applications like Cubase and Dorico, which of course are under the same umbrella and share a lot of attributes as well. So anyway, that's it. Mastering, that's what I use it for. That's one strategy among a million, billions, really, trillions. It's endless, the different ways that you can go about mastering a track. So best of luck with this. Happy mixing.